Jesus most likely, I doubt, kept an outline of sermons in his back pocket. I doubt very much that he stayed up all night organizing his thoughts and arranging point A. He didn't have 3 points, and he didn't just kind of come up with an A, B, C, D outline. I suspect that he just got up and talked. But I do think still that even though that's the case, I think you can still see the structure there and the thoughts building on one another and working through a central theme. And we see this in the Sermon on the Mount. We've kind of alluded to this a little bit. I don't know that I've done it in this specific words before, but we see this first chapter, the first section of this book, talking about in verse 1 through 14, attributes of the citizen of the kingdom of heaven. You know, these are the qualities, the characteristics you're going to have if you want to be a part of this kingdom. And he goes on from there and starts making applications. And that's really what we've been talking about the last few lessons. You know, what do these attributes look like in real life? What does it mean to truly be excellent in character? And he gave examples of how the law says this, and you have heard that it has been said this, but I say to you, the idea that your character is going to be such that goes beyond the character of what you see evidenced around you. And he gets into the next chapter, and this is really kind of where we are this morning, on the idea of attitudes and motivation. Why do I do what I do? What is it that causes me to live the life? What am I trying to get out of this life? And he'll go on, of course, later on we'll get to chapter 7 when he starts talking about analysis, looking at your environment, making judgments. You know, the ironies we'll talk about is very clearly the idea that the one verse we can all quote out of Matthew 7, judge not that you be not judged, but the entire chapter is about judgment. Looking at the things that are going on around you and evaluating them and making good decisions as a result of that. And finally, he closes off with this idea of acceptance. The acceptance of Jesus' teaching. What does it mean? You know, the wise man, the foolishness. You know, it's one thing to hear Jesus talk. It's another thing to take that, internalize it, embrace it, and then go live. And there's so many passages, I guess, that if you want to look at them and you want to think about what is the theme of this lesson. And I think it goes back to the thing that he says at the beginning of chapter 5, which kind of leads us into chapter 6, when he says, you must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And the word there is not talking about the idea of being perfect in terms of being sinless. You know, he's talking about the idea that you have looked around. And it's interesting as he goes through this passage that he has really two negative examples that he will use. Jesus used negative examples as well as positive. He spent a lot of time on don't do this, but do this rather instead. And he's got two models that he gives. You know, we think about it in terms of him looking at the Pharisees and the scribes, and he does. These are the people that are looking at the law, but they're looking at it in a very corrupted and superficial way. They're not really following it. They're looking at it as a checklist. They're looking at it as in terms of their own achievement and their own self-righteousness, but they're not seeing the true depth of the law. But he also goes the other way, doesn't he? And he talks about the idea that you also don't want to be like the Gentiles. And he brings them up a lot. He says that the Gentiles do this. The Gentiles are satisfied with this level of mercy, of love, of whatever it might be. That the last section, chapter 5, I think is the one that kind of encapsulates it when he talks about the idea of love, because he says, you know, you've heard that it is said you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. And his argument is around the idea that if you just love your friends, well, the Gentiles do that. He says, therefore, you must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And as I was talking about earlier, he's not talking about perfection in terms of being sinless here. He's talking about a perfection that is related to the idea of maturity, of completion, of completeness. You know, this is the same word that is used in passages like Ephesians 4:13, where it talks about attaining the idea of mature manhood. The idea in Hebrews 5:14, where it describes that the solid food is for the mature. The word indicates the idea of a final end. This is what you're supposed to be when you are complete. This is what you're supposed to look like. As you know, James 1:4 talks about the idea that we should be perfect, lacking in nothing. You've got everything you need. You have all of these characteristics in place to be the person that you ought to be. And I think sometimes, you know, when we look at this, and I guess this is a sermon within a sermon, but the idea that the Gentiles who love their friends, They don't love perfectly. They don't love completely. They love partially. We think of perfect love in terms of the abundance and the depth of love. But I think what Jesus is saying here is that if love has to do with me and how I look at people, and it doesn't have to do with them. I love because it's my quality, right? Well, then love can't be perfect unless it loves all. Unless I love my enemies, I love my friends, I love my neighbors, I love the people I see, I love the people I don't see. I love all those people because that's my quality. And it doesn't depend on what anybody else is doing, right? And I think that's what he means when he talks about the idea as he finishes that chapter out. He says, do not even the Gentiles the same. You therefore must be perfect. You must be complete as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I think that's really what leads us into chapter 6. Because he starts talking about the attitude that you need to have if you want to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And with that said, let's go ahead and read chapter 6. And I'm going to focus on some specific, 3 specific verses, but I want to read the entire chapter. And I suspect that we'll probably come back to this either next week or the week after and make some more specific applications as well. But he starts in verse 1 of chapter 6. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that you may be giving, and your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogue and in the street corners, and that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their words, for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where the thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, and your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And I'm going to stop there, because I think that's where we're really going to be focused on today. We all know that he goes on and talks about the idea of not being anxious about your life, the idea of trusting in God and being content. And we'll allude to that a little bit, but I want to hold off on getting too far into that. You know, as we've alluded to on a couple of instances, I think we can see that the standard of behavior that Jesus has described in chapter 5 is only going to appeal to me if I desire the outcomes that I'll get out of it. If I'm looking at my life in a spiritual way as opposed to a material way. And chapter 6 kind of plays that out a little bit. Because now what he's going to say is he's going to start looking at these behaviors that you're doing and that you're expected to be doing. And again, he's talking to Jews under the law of Moses. These are behaviors that they would be expected to do. He doesn't say you need to pray, you need to give alms, you need to fast, because the assumption is that you're doing those things. But if we're going to be perfect, we start asking the question, but why are you doing them? What are you getting out of that? What are the values that you value in this life? What are you trying to accomplish? And more to the point, what am I looking to get out of my life, but what am I also not looking to get out of my life? And I think that's where Jesus kind of goes. I wanted to focus a little bit this morning on these three verses that he said, that he outlines here at the end of our reading, because there's a common thread that almost seems like it gets interrupted, because it seems like he starts off with this idea of spiritual fulfillment, the idea of doing your good deeds and praying, doing it towards God and not towards men. You're not looking for the approval of men, you're looking for the approval of God. And it almost feels a little bit like he really shifts gears when he gets down to verse 19, because now he starts talking about money. I think we would all agree that that's really specifically what he's talking about. And I would argue that the fact that he's talking, he describes money here, really could extend back to what we've been talking about already. It's the idea of material gain, of worldly gain, of things that matter in this life, things that have, by definition, an expiration date. The idea of if I'm a child of God, if I'm a citizen of the kingdom, what gives me fulfillment? Is it spiritual things? Is it spiritual blessings, the things that God has promised to give to me, or is it the things that I can get out of this world today? And, he starts off with this idea of being fulfilled in my own self-esteem, the idea that if I do things in a certain way, people will look at me in a certain way and they will respect me and they will uphold, and I can feel good about myself and feel proud of what I've accomplished. And so I'm going to go around telling everybody all the good things that I'm doing. But that extends over into money, doesn't it? Because, we're not just talking about the idea of emotional well-being, we're talking about physical well-being. Talking about the desire to succeed on a monetary basis. And he gives these three statements in this section that I think kind of play into all these things. He starts off in verse 19 through 20 saying, do not lay up treasures. Don't lay up treasures in heaven. And as we think about what that means, I don't think he's talking here, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me hold up a second. He starts out in 19:20, do not lay up treasures in heaven. He goes on then and says, see the world in its true light. I want to talk about this one specifically because this verse seems like it kind of breaks. It's an odd verse, and it's written in kind of an odd way. It almost seems like it doesn't belong there. But it actually, I think, completes and continues the thought that Jesus is going to make. And I think what we're going to see is what he's talking about here is how do you look at the world around you? And how does that impact the way that you perceive yourself? And he finally says, you need to choose who you're going to serve. Where is your treasure? How do you see your life? And who is it that you're going to serve in the way that I live? And I guess you could really sum all that up and ask the question, in what will I put my trust to live what I consider to be a good life? Am I going to look to other people to fulfill me? Am I going to look to my bank account for security or for self-worth or for gratification of some other need? Or am I going to trust God? And I think that's really where all of this is pointing and where all of this chapter kind of comes together. And so if we look at these, I want to kind of look at these three points he makes. I think there's 5 verses, 19 through 24. And we'll start off with this idea of laying up for yourself, as he says in verse 19, treasures on earth. And we could probably spend our whole lesson just talking about this passage. Do not lay up, as he says in verse 19, for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And I think one of the things that we remember on this, when we think about, as he starts off this passage, he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen of them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. The idea that we have a choice about where we want our treasures to be. And it's not a situation where God says, you know what, you need to cover all your bets. Lay up some earthly treasures and some spiritual treasures, and you can have both of those. How many times we think about the idea if I can have the best of both worlds? I can become rich and powerful and successful in this life, and then I can turn around and expect God to bless me in the next life. And Jesus says you can't have it both ways. Because God is going to either bless you or reward you in this way, or people around you in this life are going to reward you another way. And I think one of the important things to point out about this is that, sorry about that. When God rewards us, Jesus makes the point that God's rewards are not material. They are never material. Now God blesses us, right? We know that there are rich people in the Bible. We know that God has blessed some of us with more than we need. But those aren't our rewards. And sometimes we get that cross. The Jews had gotten that cross. They believed that if I was rich, and this goes all the way back to Job's day, the people that are rich, that are well off, that are successful in this life, that's God rewarding them for being good people. That's God blessing them. But that's not what Jesus is talking about here. The idea that God rewards in an eternal way, in a spiritual way. You know, James 1:17 talks about the idea that every good and perfect gift is from above. And that's a theme that Jesus brings out throughout his ministry. You know, if you being good evil know how to give good gifts, how much more will your Father in heaven give you good gifts? The idea that when God gives you something, it is good. Not good in the sense that it appeals to my sensibilities or that it appeals to me on a material level. It is good in that it has value. It has eternal value. It's not going to go away. When God gives me a blessing, it's not something that has an expiration date, right? It's not something that I know that God gives me this, but it expires at some point, and at some point it's just going to be worthless. Everything that God rewards me with is good for eternity. It does not go away. And the question is that the kind of reward we want? You know, and I think too that he's not talking here about people who are blessed materially. You know, as we said, we look at men like Abraham, we look at men like Job, we look at men like David. You know, there's men in the New Testament that are referred to in the letters of Paul they're well off. Some of the disciples were well off. Some of the apostles, I should say. The point is not about material blessings or having those things. I think what he's saying here is the idea of those who desire to be blessed materially, those who desire to lay up for themselves treasures, who amass treasures, to get rich, to have material blessings in abundance. If you've known those people that always had that attitude that it's never enough, I always need to have more. You know, there's a temptation for us here to look at that, and if you're like me, you kind of at this point had this vision of the old cartoon of Scrooge McDuck, lying in his mansion on a big pile of gold coins and doing all that. And that's what he's talking about here. Well, he's not talking about me being financially well off. Well, maybe not, maybe. But what he's talking about is this idea that what I have is never enough. Then I need more. And I don't need more because I have a specific work that I want to accomplish. It's not about getting more so I can use it on things that are right and good and godly and legitimate concerns. It's the idea of just having more because I want to have more. And it kind of points to three concepts, I guess, when you think about that. First of all, the idea that what I don't have now is not sufficient. I'm not content. There's a lack of contentment in my life. Second of all, there's this idea that even if I don't need those things now, if I don't need that big stack of money right now, I may need it later. And I want to make sure to have it there. So there's that idea of a lack of security. And thirdly, a lot of times, and this is the one that probably we should think about, is that in the reality, I want these because the rewards that God offers me really don't appeal to me that much. You know, Jesus offers our reward in spiritual terms, the things that God offers, but I would kind of rather have the big stack of money. I'd really rather have the prestige because I can enjoy those things right now. They make a difference in my life today, right now. Because the reality is, we can look around this, even among the Lord's church, among people who are claiming to serve God. The reality is that people are not interested in serving God when they have to put their own preferences aside, if they don't see tangible and immediate benefits to being a Christian. That's how a lot of times, you know, the whole idea of the health and wealth gospel came about. We're going to get you to come and worship with us with a promise that you don't have to wait for God to reward you in heaven. God will reward you materially right now with the things that you want in this life. And we see that playing out, that desire, that conflict in that first part of the chapter. What good is it to do good to people if no one sees it? If people don't have a higher opinion of me because of how I pray or how fast or how I fast, what does it matter to me? I need to have something that I can show for it now. For now, Jesus shifts the focus. What good are the spiritual blessings later if they're not accompanied by material blessings today? And Jesus is always constantly pointing out this idea of being content and the dangers of covetousness. And we see that story over in Luke 12. It's funny, when he typically talks about the covetousness of the Pharisees and the scribes and the rulers of that day, and he'll bring that up a lot. But it's interesting to note that one of the stories that we think about in terms of covetousness does not come from the Pharisees. In Luke chapter 12, if you remember, he's talking about the influence and the leaven of the Pharisees. He's warning the disciples and warning the crowds that are listening to him. And in the middle of all this, somebody stands up and interrupts this lesson and says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." He tells him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." He said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grains and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you. The things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God." And he goes on, when he describes this, he starts to use some of the same language that is found in the Sermon on the Mount. But if you notice, he goes down later in this chapter and says, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give to the needy, provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches, no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." This is an argument that was apparently very common in Jewish philosophy, but it's one that Jesus makes a lot. It's one that Paul makes later on in Romans chapter 8. The idea that if God will give you such great, abundant spiritual blessings, why do you think he's not going to take care of you materially? Why would he ignore these needs when he has given you such a great thing? In Romans 8:32, when Paul says, if God did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not graciously give us all things? And again, he's not saying give us anything we want. He's talking about fulfilling every need that we have, every legitimate need for a child of God, but trust that God sees those things and God will bless us in the way that we need to be blessed. But if we're not content with what God has promised us, it goes back to the idea that Jesus talked about in the Lord's Prayer that we kind of glossed over, and I'm sure we'll get back to it. Give us this day what? Our daily bread. I'm asking for God the things that I need today. Not God, give me as much as my neighbor. Give me an abundance so that I don't have to worry about tomorrow. I can just have all of my money now and I can be completely secure. That's not what we're promised, and that's not what we're told to ask for. But when we're not content with those promises, we're going to now divert our energy away from doing his will and focusing on doing my will. God promised me this much, but I want this much. And so it's up to me to go get that. I got to go fill in the gap. And so now I need to apply my energy and my expertise and my intellect and all those other things to make up the difference that God has not assured me that I'm going to get. And let's be honest, that's kind of how a lot of times we look at our lives. We kind of put ourselves on it that if I want a greater life, if I want a bigger life, if I want a bigger car, I want a bigger house, I want more money, I want a bigger bank account, I need to go out and get it. What does 1 Timothy 6 talk about? As he says in verse 6 through 8, he says, godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and we can take nothing out of the world. But if we have food and clothing with these, we will be content. But he goes on to say, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. There's an element of trust and an element of faith that is involved in here. As Hebrews 13:5 says, keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have, for he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Is that enough? Am I content with the promises that God has given us? Paul warns about all these different evils, but it's interesting to see the evil that Jesus points out here. It's not necessarily the idea that I'm gonna, if I really become covetous, I'm gonna start stealing, or I'm gonna start acting corruptly in my business. All those things might very well happen. But I think the thing that Jesus warns us about is that our priorities will not be where they need to be. We will not be focused on the things of God. And that kind of leads into this point that he makes in this next passage, because he talks about this idea that if I'm focused on pleasing God, then I can know that as long as I'm living according to that pattern, living the way God sees it, not only is God pleased with my life and my sacrifice, but he's laying aside a reward for me in heaven that is greater than anything. But that begs the question, or that brings up the question, I should say. How am I examining my life? How do I see the things around me? And I think this is where, again, this verse comes in. It's a little bit of an odd transition, because he's been talking about laying up treasures in heaven, but then he goes and says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? It seems kind of out of context, but in addition, there's a little bit of a vagueness about what Jesus is talking about here. That when you look at the different commentaries and different ways that these words are translated, the word, the ESV that I just read says if your eye is healthy. You might have if your eye is good, if your eye is single, if your eye is simple. That seems like an odd range of meaning in this passage, but I think there's also even another added layer. Because as you start to study this a little bit more, what you start to find as well is that the word that is used here in this text, when it refers to this idea of singleness, it can also refer to generosity, because it alludes to a Hebrew saying or phrase, or I'm blanking on the word that I want to use right here. But the idea of thinking about a bad eye as opposed to a good eye. If you have a bad eye, an eye that is not singular, it denotes someone who is stingy, someone who's not generous. And that kind of feeds into exactly what Jesus has been talking about, isn't it? If your eye is single, if you're looking at this world in terms of selfishness, in terms of what I can get out of it, it's going to change the way that you see yourself. Because I think that's what he's talking about here. He talks about that idea that if the light that is in you, your whole body will either be full of light or full of darkness. And it's kind of interesting. Jesus has used that metaphor earlier over in Matthew chapter 5, when he talks about the idea of letting your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. And he uses that idea there in terms of influence, right? In terms of the way that people see us and that they see God in us. But Jesus doesn't really use that in this way. He uses a little bit of a different illustration. It's one that's very similar to what he does over in Luke chapter 11, where he makes a very similar statement. He's been talking about, in fact, let's go and look over there. Luke chapter 11. He's talking to people and trying to teach them, and they're looking, as we see over and over in the Bible, that they want a sign. They want to know, I want to see that Jesus is who he says he is. Now he's been doing signs and wonders and miracles and all these other things. It says in verse 29, when the crowds were increasing, he began to say, this generation is an evil generation. It seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah became a sign to the people of Nineveh, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. The queen of the south will rise up to the judgment with these men of this generation and condemn them, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. And notice what he does from here. He goes into that same language that we just read over in Matthew 6. He says, no one after lighting a lamp puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who enter may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is healthy, the whole body is full of light. When it's bad, your body is full of darkness. Therefore, be careful lest the light in you be darkness. If then your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, it will be wholly bright, as when a lamp with its rays give you light. See what he's talking about there? He's making the application here that you're looking at all the things that Jesus is doing, all the miracles and the signs, and you're still saying, I need a sign. Because you're not perceiving what is right in front of you. You're not being honest in the way that you're looking at your life. And Jesus talks about that idea that you need to have the right kind of eye. You need to have the right heart. You need to have the right vision in terms of the way that you perceive what's going on. And you need to be able to turn that inward and look honestly at yourself. Because he says, if you're looking at the world in a skewed manner, you're going to look at yourself in the same way. And he talks about that idea that if your light is bad, if your eye is bad, then your whole body is full of darkness. And he says, how dark is that darkness? And that kind of reminds you a little bit of that idea that he comes up with over and over with, the idea that we can become so deluded in our mind and our hearts that we can't see who we really are anymore. Everything's fine because I perceive that the light is darkness. The darkness is light. I think that I can see everything clearly. That's the real danger for us. Are we seeing things as they are? Are we evaluating our life? Are we looking at the treasures of this world versus the treasures of God, and are we seeing them for what they are? Or are we deluding ourselves? And that's a danger for us, particularly we live in this middle of a very strong material culture. It affects the way that we perceive things. And this goes back to that idea of us thinking about covetousness as me rolling around in a big pile of money. That's not what covetousness is about. Covetousness is about where are my priorities? What choices do I make? What is my goal in this life? What will make me satisfied? What will fulfill me? And when we live in this life, I was thinking about this a little bit, materialism is, I love this country, but folks, materialism is baked into our DNA in this country. A very good percentage of people came to this country to make money. That was the point. And we live in this entrepreneurial society, and it's done a lot of great things for us. But it is also bred into this idea of success and financial well-being and the idea of attaining more. There's always more that I can get. There's always growth that I can do. And we just have that in our mind that, our work is what fulfills us, our success. And it bleeds into everything that we do. And we start realizing that when I start making choices that are spiritual about things that are physical, that really goes against the grain of where our culture is. Why in the world would you think about scheduling your work around worship? That's just worship. It's not that big a deal. This is your money. This is your livelihood. And we could extend that beyond money. We could extend that to any number of different things that this world values. But here, we're talking really more about financial things. We don't see those things as any big deal because that's what we see all around us. That's how we perceive the world. And we can very easily lose sight of what God is calling us to do here. When he describes over in John 9, you remember the story of the blind man, and Jesus has basically created this living parable out of this blind man that he's healed. And as he talks about this in John 9, verse 39, it says, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." And some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to them, "Are we also blind?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains." The problem is not whether you can see or not. The problem is that you don't think that you have a problem. The problem is that you think you see perfectly. You don't see that you're blind, because if you saw that you're blind, you would do what this blind man did, which is you would desire to be healed. Do we desire to be healed when we see these things? Luke 16, 14 through 15, when the Pharisees, it says, who were lovers of money, heard all these things, they ridiculed him. He said to them, "You are those who justify yourself before men, but God knows your heart. For what is exalted among men is an abomination in the sight of God." All those things that we talked about in chapter 6 that were exalted of men. The man who prays with his hand up in the synagogue for everybody to see, the one who sounds the trumpet. There's indication maybe that what he's talking about there is there was kind of a funnel-shaped funnel that went into the box that you would give your alms in the temple. And the idea of coming up with my handful of money and kind of with a flourish, just kind of throwing it up into the funnel so it kind of rings around and makes a lot of noise, and everybody hears just how much I just threw into there. The idea of making sure that everybody knows what I have done and getting my fulfillment out of that. Those things that make me feel good, the things that make the world look at me and go, wow, that guy really did something impressive. That's an abomination before God. Do we understand that? It's easy to lose sight of it. Our desire for wealth and worldly gain can blind us. As it blinded those people in that day. Because when that's what I'm focused on, that's how I determine my wealth, it's how I see the world. And it's how I evaluate my life with God. We mentioned that the word used to describe the eye in this passage is being translated healthy or good. But the King James, I don't usually go with the King James that much, but this one's actually pretty good because the word translated there is translated as single. And I think it's really useful as well to think about it. When he says your eye is single, I think it's a weird concept, but I think we understand what he means in this context, don't we? Because if my eye is single, that means I'm looking at one thing and I'm focused on one priority, and this is what I'm concerned about in my life. But what happens if my eye is divided? What if I have double vision? I don't know if that's what the intent is here, but that seems like what it is. I'm trying to look, because I understand. Look, I know that money is not everything. I know that I need to be pleasing God. I need to be seeking things that are above, but I really like these things too. I don't want to give up those things. And now I'm looking at my life, and I'm not looking at one thing. I'm looking at two things. Maybe I'm looking at more than that. But I'm trying to live in this world and that world. I'm trying to satisfy my physical, my material desires, and my spiritual desires all at the same time. And as a result of that, it's going to make me miserable. It's going to divide my vision, and I'm not going to see anything clear. I'm going to see the world very differently. And that really kind of goes in, doesn't it, to, I've skipped a lot of the moving forward to that third statement he makes in verse 24, doesn't it? That's kind of what he's talking about here, because he says, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one or love the other, he will devote to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And the word, we were talking about this earlier in the week, the word there is mammon. And as I understand it, the definition, the specific meaning of that is a little unclear. But generally speaking, everybody understands that it's talking about the idea of either the idea of riches or the desire for riches. It is the desire for wealth. It's usually translated money. That's probably a pretty good way to look at it. You can't serve God and money. The idea that when you're pursuing wealth, you're making that essential. You're kind of making that your God, aren't you? Because the idea is that if my heart is divided, if my focus is divided, my desire is to serve God, but it's also to get rich. If Jesus has made one thing very, very clear in this sermon and throughout his ministries, God does not share devotion. He does not allow us to have two gods. That's from the very beginning. Can't serve God and money. Because what happens, you're going to pick one over the other at some point. Maybe you won't pick it every time. You've really got two options, don't you, if you try to serve two gods. I can alternate. I can deliberately say, all right, I'm going to put God first this week, and I'm going to put my career first next week, or whatever you decide. Or I can just take them one by one. Well, I gotta do this. I have this priority that I've got to do. I can either do that, or I can spend my time and my resources doing something that I know I need to do for the work of the Lord. And I'll just decide each time. But you know what happens, don't you? Because invariably, as he says, you'll either hate the one or love the other. You will find yourself choosing the one that is truly important in your life. In Colossians 3:5-6, when Paul writes about this, he says, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these things, the wrath of God is coming. It's interesting, if you go back to the book of Job, over in Job 31, again, it's a treasure trove of stuff. And in the middle of this, he makes a statement that I think is really interesting. In Job 31, in verse 24, he says, if I have made gold my trust, or called fine gold my confidence, if I have rejoiced because my wealth was abundant, or because my hand had found much, if I have looked at the sun when it shone, or the moon moving in splendor, and my heart has been secretly enticed, and my mouth has kissed my hand, this also would be an iniquity to be punished by the judges, for I would have been false to God above. Notice how he groups that together? He starts out about talking about money. He ends up talking about other gods. Why? Because both of them are the thing that I trust instead of God to give me what I want. That's really the whole point of idolatry, right? Though I worship a God because that God will give me what I want in whatever way that is. And And I think that's kind of where we're talking about it. When we start talking about covetousness as idolatry, that's what we really mean. Am I putting my pursuit of money over my pursuit of God? And as I said, we can make that decision one day at a time, and we say, well, I'll take care of this today. I'll take care of God tomorrow. And the decisions keep piling up. And we start realizing who it is that we're really serving. Who is getting our time? Who is truly our master? Who is dictating? We think about a master, someone who dictates the way that you use your time, the way you live your life. Does my desire for financial gain? Does my desire for earthly fulfillment? Does my desire for approval? Whatever it may be, is that what drives the things that I do? That's really the point of chapter 6, isn't it? At some point, I think we're always looking for that big decision. That one time where I can say, you know what, I'm going to take my stand here and I'm going to choose God. And we miss all the little decisions. But maybe you're thinking about this right now as well, but over in Matthew 19, Jesus gives a man a chance to make that big decision. In Matthew 19, we see the story of the rich ruler who comes up to Jesus, beginning in verse 16. It says, behold, a man came up to him. And some of the other translations, versions of the synoptics say that he ran up to him, kneeling before him. There's an urgency about this. It's saying, teacher, what is a good deed? What good deed must I do to have eternal life? He said, then why do you ask me about what is good? There's only one that's good. If you would enter life, keep the commandments. He said, in which ones? He said, Jesus said, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the young man said to him, all these things I have kept. What do I still lack? And Jesus said to him, if you would be perfect. Notice that word? Notice that idea again? If you would be perfect. If you want to be the person God wants you to be, if you want to be the person that is going to be in the kingdom of heaven, this is what you do. Go sell all that you possess. Give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven, and come follow me. When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Jesus said to his disciples, truly I say to you, only with difficulty will a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Yeah, I want to come back to there's a whole lot of things I could talk about in terms of that parable itself. When he tells the man, why do you call me good? Sometimes it's an interesting statement, and you almost get the impression of Jesus. We hear this, and it sounds like he's saying, he's kind of being sharp with us. Why are you calling me good? What's wrong with you? Why would you call me good? But you can also read it, which I think is more likely, of him kind of prodding a little bit and probing and say, why do you call me good? What is it about me that is good? If we know that there's nobody good, but God, why are you applying good to me? Is there something you want to tell me? Is there something you'd like to acknowledge at this point? And that train doesn't get followed. But Jesus looks on him, and Mark 10:21 tells us that he looked at him and loved him. He looked at him, he perceived him. You almost get the idea that Jesus kind of looked at him and regarded him and thought about it and looked at the person he is. It says that he loved him. And he says, if you would be perfect, come do this. Jesus didn't ask a whole lot of people to come join him. You remember that? For the most part, when he heals, he would tell people, no, go home. He would heal people. They would want to follow him. He says, no, go home until this person had something. This person had something to offer the kingdom of God. Jesus recognized it and said, you know what? You come with me. I got work for you if you're willing to do it. But he was unwilling to do it because he knew what it would cost him. And at the end of the day, I thought about this a little bit. I don't know if this is the most appropriate example or not, but if you've ever been in a relationship and had somebody break up with you, they always act really sad when they do it. But, I always remember thinking, that really doesn't help me at all. You still broke up with me. Just the fact that you're sad about it doesn't really help. You chose something. You chose one over the other. And as much as we look at this rich man and say, it's admirable that this was a hard choice for him, but the bottom line is he made his choice. I'd like to think that he came back and changed that later. I hope that he did. Our choices may be hard for us, but we still got to make the right choice. And here's a situation again where this man was given that one big choice. And he chose wrong. And we always say, man, I wouldn't have done that. I would have jumped on that. That would have been a great opportunity. Maybe we would have. I hope that we would have. But the reality is, I always wonder about that. I ask myself that question a lot. Would I be willing to sell possessions if somebody needed it? You know, I don't think the point of this is that we all need to go out and sell our stuff and become. This is not about taking about poverty. What it is about is what are our priorities. And if my financial gain, if my job, if my possessions are standing in the way of me serving God, which am I going to pick? This man made his choice, but God calls us to make our choice. What matters to us in our life? What are we willing to give up in the service of God? Because as he says, we cannot be fully committed to God. I say that. I'm going to rebuke myself. Fully committed is redundant. This idea that I can be committed, kind of, is not true. You're either committed or you're not. And that's a lot of times our problem. We commit ourselves to God, but not really. Because we've got other things that we're focused on as well. When Jesus talks to his disciples, what does he tell them? Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, follow me. For whosoever would save his life will lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gain the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? We want to do that. I mean, if we're honest with it, again, it goes back to that question, if the eye is good or if the eye is evil. If I'm looking at this world the way God sees it, or am I looking at it the way the world sees it? That's the only way we can really be honest about this, you know. Where it really is my priority, where it really is my reward. Have I already received it? You know, that's the question that I ask myself a lot, and hopefully we all ask ourselves that question. Because it's an important one. We need to know this is an urgent one. Jesus makes it very clear, you have your reward. You're not going to get another one. So where's my treasure? You know, thought about this a little bit. How do we want to check that? How do we want to check our balance, as it were? And Jesus tells us where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. But you know, that's a truism that works both ways, doesn't it? If that is true, then it's also true that where my heart is, there will my treasure be. Where's my heart? Where do I spend my time? What do I think about when it's the end of the day? And I'm thinking about what I want to accomplish in my life and what the concerns are that I have. What makes me worried? What keeps me up at night? What motivates me to act? What are the things that give me joy when they come to my mind? When I'm at home and there's really nothing going on, and I have to, if that's really even, we can't do that anymore because we've always got cell phones and we don't really have a lot of time where we can just shut it off and just think. But hypothetically, when that happens, what do I think about? What is it that fulfills me in this life? Be honest with ourselves about that. The good thing about it is that we can always change those things. We can always rededicate ourselves to that. We understand that life is going to be a struggle, and that taking the spiritual over the material is not an easy thing. If it were easy, a lot of people would do it. Jesus will say later on in chapter 7, into the straight gate. For broad is the way, and narrow, and I knew I was going to be able to quote that, right? For broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many will find it. If it were easy, a lot of people would do it. So some things to think about as we go about our week, and we think about our lives, and we think about what we want to accomplish here at Kimberly, what we want to accomplish in our communities with our neighbors and our friends and our family. What is it that motivates me? Am I truly serving God with all my heart? The lesson is yours this morning. Hopefully it's been encouraging and challenging as it was for me as I write it, and I'm making a catalog of all the things that I need to be thinking about in my own life. Let's challenge ourselves to do better. Let's challenge ourselves in our walk with God as Jesus challenges us every day. Whatever your need may be tonight, this morning, if you need the prayers of the saints, if you have anything that we can help you with, if you're online and want to understand more about God and what it means to have a relationship with Jesus, we can help you do that. Please let us know, however it may be, as we're letting our invitation song.